Welcome back to the next episode of TMT with Mike O'Reilly. My guest, Rhonda Weaver with the Comcast Corporation. In a first for the video cast, we are in the field. We have an opportunity to be in a neighborhood just outside of Seattle, Washington, to talk about and understand critical infrastructure attacks. Why Washington? Why Seattle? Well, it just so happens, and disappointingly, it is a hotbed of problem. It has one of the highest incidents of nationwide intentional physical attacks on broadband networks. Rhonda, thanks so much for being with me.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Mike. This is so important.
So let's start with some basics and some building blocks here. What's your role with Comcast, and how has this issue really mushroomed for your position in Seattle?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm a Vice President of State Government Affairs for Comcast. I've been in this role for nearly 23 years. Before that, I worked for another communications company, so 30 years, mostly doing work with the legislature, but also regulatory bodies and other state agencies as needed. And about 12 years ago, we saw something similar, where communications companies were just being attacked across the board, along with power companies and others. And so we worked together with a coalition, along with a legislator, Representative Roger Goodman, to put together a metal theft working group. And through that, we got a lot of really good regulations for the recycling industry. It was a little contentious at first, but since then, they've just become really great partners in Washington. And in fact, I think we are way ahead of what a lot of other states have done when it comes to regulating that industry. But we've seen things ramp up again in the last few years. And the communications industry in Washington is under attack, like you said. And it's not just Comcast, it's everyone else. I'm just here today to speak about the impacts on my company. But we started looking at what we could do in the future to help kind of stem the onslaught of the attacks to our network.
So we happen to be on this particular corner because not many months ago, Comcast was attacked by an individual who severed the lines and caused enormous problems. So I'd be interested to hear what happened without getting into the particulars of the court case.
Yeah, well, right here, we were hit 3 different times in just a period of days. We'd get the network back up and running. They'd come again at night and tear it back down. Now, they're not looking for our fiber. Our fiber is of zero value to them, but what they're trying to do is get to some of the lines that may have copper infrastructure, and those they are cutting and hauling away, and we are, we're in the way. I don't really want to get into how many customers and businesses were out in this area because it's a statewide problem, and we'll talk a little more about how many times we've been hit. I think a little further along in the interview, but we are in a crisis in Washington, and it's not about not being able to watch your television. It's about people picking up the phone, and from your former job, we've done a lot of work on 988 and 888 in this industry. Washington was the first state in the country to roll out fully functional 988. When our lines are down, people can't communicate. They can't call 911, they can't call 988, they can't do their work. And they're at the mercy of us getting our network back up and running. And that's the real crisis here.
And maybe this gets to that question you're comfortable or touchy, but does an outage have different reach? Depending, sometimes I suspect that they may be a neighborhood, and some may go further. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. We could have a small group of homes and businesses out, or we could have tens of thousands out. We've had incidents with over 100,000 customers out at once while we got things up and running.
So let's talk about the scope of it. You mentioned, how often are you facing attacks? What's the magnitude of the problem that you're seeing in the Seattle area?
Well, since January 1st, we've had 88 attacks on our network in the Pacific Northwest. That's, just to give you a scope of the problem, our network in the Pacific Northwest spans over 33,000 miles of fiber lines. 88 times we've had to send crews out. Sometimes it's an easy fix, sometimes it's much more complicated, and sometimes we have to wait for power to come and get back up. So, it's a massive problem.
What is a typical response? Every situation is unique, but from a Comcast perspective, what happens when an outage occurs? Are you alerted by the network, or do individuals contact you and say, my service is out, I have a problem, and then you've got to have truck rolls and technicians notified all hours of the night?
Yeah, we have all of that, but our network is very, very smart. We use API monitoring 24/7. We are alerted when there's an anomaly to the network right away. We are also deploying AI tools and machine learning to be able to notify us even faster. We've got a very, very smart network, and we've deployed a lot of cameras along our network. So there have been times where we've captured the perpetrator on camera, and we've been able to notify law enforcement. And there have been a few arrests. The problem is that right now this is just considered a misdemeanor. It's misdemeanor vandalism, and it's hard to get big arrests made on a misdemeanor charge. It's hard to get prosecutors to prosecute, and that's where we're at now.
When an outage occurs, what's the typical amount of time that someone may suffer? Is it, you mentioned different scenarios and all the different formulations, but I remember going through, is it a day, is it a week, is it a month? How fast can you guys, are your good team able to make it happen?
As fast as humanly possible, Mike. I mean, look, it could be, you may never know, right? If you're a customer and you were down, it might be in the middle of the night. We may have gotten it back up and cleaned up before you ever even knew. Sometimes it can take hours and hours. It just depends on the magnitude of the damage that was done.
Can you started talking about the impact on users and networks, 988 and others. What is the scope of the problem that is faced by residents and businesses that use Comcast in this area?
Well, look, we learned during COVID that broadband is essential in doing our work, being educated, being able to do retail transactions, all of those things. So when the network's down, it's not just, like I said, missing a ball game. It's about being able to get your work in on time that day. It's about your kids being able to educate well if they're home and working virtually. And it's really about communications. We've had instances, not necessarily Comcast, but in the industry. And I want to talk a little bit about the coalition that we formed in a bit. But we've had radio communications out between first responders. Hospitals have been hit where their communications were down. We've had military bases affected in the area. So it is massive, and it's about the health and safety of the citizens of Washington.
You started to talk about the reason or reasons and why fiber doesn't make much sense. Why is Seattle a hotbed? What has been causing the interest in taking down and causing critical infrastructure attacks?
The cost of copper. It's that simple. They're after copper. You might have read a few months ago, twice in 1 week, Sound Transit, our light rail system, was completely shut down by metal thieves. So it's not just communications infrastructure that's being shut down. It's other types as well. But the cost of copper. So they're going after the copper lines and taking down other types of lines that have no value to them in the process.
So talk a little bit about, is it frustrating to know that these criminals are attacking your network for no particular value to themselves, that they're disrupting and causing enormous damage, and it's actually there's no profit to be had on their side of the equation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's frustrating for anyone whose fiber lines or copper lines are severed. It's not about the value. I mean, and here's the thing. Copper is very, very valuable right now, but we've got those really great regulations in place for the recyclers, and they've been great partners. And when a truck rolls in with, pieces of severed copper, they call the authorities. But that doesn't stop them from trucking it across state lines or going to bad actors. And the good actors are not our problem. It's the ones that are unlicensed already that are the problem. And So just focusing on recyclers is not getting the job done. We need to start going after the people who are actually committing the crimes.
Have you had has the legislature been receptive to increasing the penalties? Is there an effort to help them not only be educated but also to move legislation in the state?
Yeah, we're getting there. We're gaining momentum. Comcast has led a pretty broad coalition of other communications providers that meet quite often, along with law enforcement, representatives from prosecutor's office, the recycling industry. And we get together quite often to talk about, first, what are you seeing out in the field? I could tell you the 88 incidents we've had since the beginning of the year is the tip of the iceberg. Everyone is suffering. Wireless companies, wireline companies, traditional copper. But we're working together to say, what is it that we can do together? And what we'd like to see is we'd like to see penalties increase for committing these crimes to a felony. And we've had legislation introduced in 2025. It didn't get very far, it didn't even get a hearing, but it was introduced. We'd like to get it reintroduced, hopefully pre-filed for 2026. And get action pretty early, because we are in a crisis, and we think giving law enforcement that additional tool in their tool belt will really help in the future with trying to stem this. By the way, the legislature recently passed legislation sort of related to this, well, not related at all, but along the same lines, which is on organized retail theft. They've made that a felony. And on catalytic converter theft, which was a real crisis here until they finally acted and said, this is a felony if you're doing this. And we're asking for the same treatment here.
So there's a question of whether education would be helpful here. You want the you'd hope that the criminals would know the difference between fiber and copper, but you don't want to split your coalition, that any cut would be harmful. And you also don't want to show them a path for potential business line.
I'm not going to send them a path to get my competitors' copper down. I mean, that's just the wrong way to go. We have done a great education campaign. We've produced 2 PSAs so far, one using a King County Sheriff's deputy that was well received. We're still running it on the air. Not branded for Comcast. It's about, all the lines. It's all about, if you see something, if you're out driving around and you see something that looks wrong, if you see people hooking those lines up there and tie them to their truck, maybe make a phone call. If you see something, say something. It is the campaign. The other one was using a police officer out of the Tacoma area, also well received. So we're continuing to produce those. Again, not Comcast branded. It's about communications in general. So we are doing our part there. We are putting cameras up to try to catch people. We're labeling so that if material, and ours never makes it in, but because it's not valuable to recyclers, but labeling so that people know, hey, this is your fiber or your copper here. So trying to do all those things, but at the end of the day, we've got to start making arrests to the people perpetrating these crimes.
So you mentioned recyclers and how Washington has been a leader in addressing the recycling side of the equation. Is it something that we could copy, a model that we could copy for the rest of the United States that are facing similar problems?
Yeah, I think we could. I think that the fact that they get licenses, they have a reporting structure where they report back to law enforcement, and they share with other recycling organizations in Washington. Hey, this guy just drove up with this truck. There's things that they've put into place. One tool that we don't have yet that I think would be really helpful would be for the Department of Licensing to have the authorization to revoke licenses for bad actors when it's been proven. And we don't have that yet, but it's something that I think could work along with the other things that we've talked about today.
So talk a little bit about and you mentioned this, the King County law enforcement community's response. Are they receptive to the arguments you're making? Are they, the statute is the statute, but are they making arrests? Are they following up on incidents that are happening?
King County law enforcement have been wonderful partners for us to work with. They've been very responsive. They'd like more tools in their tool belt and more solution, but they have made arrests. It's they follow up on every lead we get them, and they've been tracking people down. So they have been a wonderful partner in this crisis.
What has been your experience with the prosecutor side of the equation? They have a misdemeanor statute. You're talking and hoping and working hard to bump them up to felonies. Are they able to pursue misdemeanors? Really don't get to rise to the top of the pile?
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of outside of my specialty here on this part, but what I will say is, if the damage is monetarily significant enough, that's how we can get it to a felony now, but it's a convoluted way to do it. But the prosecutor's office has been responsive here, and so has law enforcement, but their hands are tied by the statute they have, which is just not robust enough.
When you look at the situation, and you worked on this a number of years ago, it's showing its head again. Is this something that just naturally fades as criminals move on to something else, or does it require, as you say, it's going to require additional action by the legislators to enact a new statute to really bump up and show intention to the matter? It's not something that's going to take care of itself.
It's not going to take care of itself. Look, I mentioned before organized retail theft and catalytic converter theft. The statutes that they put on the books, which took time, I mean, it was hard fought to get them, has made a difference. There have been some big notable arrests made, and it has made a difference, and that's what we're asking for here. We're asking for the legislature to take action to make this one of their high priority items for 2026, and hopefully we can work together and get it done.
Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insight on this really important issue, and for bearing with us on this beautiful day but noisy corner, which signifies how important this neighborhood is to the community. It has a lot of activity, from a school, a church, a shopping center around the corner, and I know we're not too far from the airport.
That's
so
right.
I can't thank you enough, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for your time.